because North Korea brought it on itself, and we're headed toward a war if things don't change.
But that could result in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of casualties. You've been there. You understand, even with conventional weaponry, what potentially is at stake along the demilitarized zone. Seoul, a city of what, 10 or 15 or 20 million people, is only 30 miles away.
Yeah, you're dead right. It's not lost upon me what a war would look like with North Korea. One, we would win it, but a lot of people would get hurt and killed. At the end of the day, the president's got to pick between homeland security and regional stability. He's told China, Japan, and South Korea that he wants a diplomatic solution. We're not trying regime change. We're not trying to spread democracy to North Korea. We're not trying to unify the peninsula. We're just simply saying we're not going to allow this man in North Korea to have a missile to hit America with a nuclear weapon on top. And all the bad things you described are real, but the president is picking America over the region, and I hope the region will help us find a diplomatic solution.
So when the president said today, we will take care of it, it is his situation, we will handle, those were his words. What do you understand from him? What is he saying?
Well, I talked to him this morning before the missile test, and we talked about Texas, but we talked about North Korea. You know, every president before him has said, we're not going to allow North Korea to have nuclear weapons. Well, they got nuclear weapons. Every president before President Trump has said, we're never going to allow them to hit the homeland with an ICBM with a nuclear weapon on top. They're about to get that capability. China is the key to this. The president's engagement with the Chinese was very productive, but this is a provocative act by North Korea. They're miscalculating President Trump, and he is ready, if necessary, to destroy this regime to protect America. And I hope the regime understands if President Trump has to pick between destroying the North Korean regime and the American homeland, he's going to destroy the regime. I hope China understands that also.
Even if it means the huge number of casualties?
Even if it means thousands, hundreds of thousands of people over there get hurt to protect America. Now, that's the choice that the president has to make. I stand with him. The best outcome is not to have a war. I don't want a war. He doesn't want a war, but we're not going to let this crazy man in North Korea have the capability to hit the homeland. We're not going to live this way. To our friends in China, we're not going to live this way. You need to help us. And if you don't help us, we'll take care of it. And us taking care of it means that the war's in your backyard, not ours.
We hadn't seen a missile launch along this kind, any missile launch from North Korea since the last one, I think, was September 15th.
Right.
Do you think the president's rhetoric about Kim Jong-un, he calls him short and fat, or his decision to name North Korea as a state sponsor of terror, once again, is actually provoking Kim Jong-un to do what he did today, for example, and presumably much more down the road?
President Trump's not the problem, it's the North Korean regime. They believe that if they get an ICBM to hit America with a nuclear weapon on top, they're home free. I believe that whether they use it or not, they're liable to sell any technology. It's not in the world's interest for Kim Jong-un to have a hydrogen bomb and a bunch of missiles. So I think they believe the best way for the regime to survive is to be able to attack America. They're making the biggest miscalculation in modern history. If North Korea watches CNN, I hope you understand that President Trump is not going to allow the United States to live under the threat of a nuclear missile, a nuclear weapon coming to America from North Korea. And if you want that capability, you're going to get in a fight with the United States, and you're going to lose that fight, and that'll be the end of the regime.
I do know the North Korean leadership watches CNN and CNN International. As you know, the president, he has touted his relationship with Chinese President Xi. Is there any evidence that you've seen that it's actually having a positive impact on the situation?
I thought so until today. I was very encouraged that a delegation from China was going to North Korea. Again, China shares the same goal. A denuclearized peninsula. We don't want South Korea to have nuclear weapons, Japan, or North Korea. We share the same goal. I was very encouraged. I thought the engagement with the Chinese president and President Trump went very well until today. Clearly to me, the North Koreans are not listening to the Chinese. They don't take the statements of President Trump seriously, and they're making a huge miscalculation, and we're on a collision course with this regime. President Trump is not going to allow you to perfect the technology to hit America with a nuclear weapon, and if there's a war, it will be because you want one.
Do you agree with the president that Russian President Putin can be very helpful in dealing with North Korea as well?
No.
You don't think they have any influence, the Russians?
None at all. I think the Russians are trying to intercede here by helping North Korea. You know, the sanctions have worked to some extent, but the regime clearly believes that the pathway forward for their survival is to have a nuclear weapon to hit America, hold us hostage, and they're home free. They're making a big miscalculation. I don't see where the Russians can help at all, but I do believe the Chinese are outcome determinative. They own 90% of the North Korean economy, and the Chinese leadership has to tell the North Korean leadership in very no uncertain terms that things have to change.
On August 2nd, as you know, Senator, the president signed into law a bill that was overwhelmingly passed in the House and the Senate, 98-2 in the Senate, that would enact new sanctions on North Korea, Russia, and Iran. But guess what? That law has not yet been implemented, and it's almost December. Does that concern you?
Yes, it does. The Congress has spoken in a uniquely bipartisan way. We're talking about a dysfunctional Congress. I understand why people think we can't, we're not very popular, but 97-2 for Russian sanctions in the Senate, overwhelming vote in the House. We've created a new law that the president signed. It is his job, his obligation to implement that law, and I hope he will.
Why hasn't he?
I don't know, but I can tell you this, that the Congress is going to insist on its implementation. I think the president's making a serious miscalculation here. The Russians will only respond when we push back. They did interfere with our election. They will keep doing it until the price for doing it is too great. Let's impose these sanctions that the Congress passed overwhelmingly, and the only way you're ever going to get Putin's attention, in my view, is to push back.
Because, as you know, the president strongly opposed this legislation. He didn't want you to implement new sanctions against Russia specifically. Why do you think he refuses to get tougher with Russians, especially with Putin?
I don't know. I think he's got North Korea just absolutely right. We're never going to let them hit the American homeland with a nuclear weapon. If we have to go to war to stop it, we will. I think he understands the Iranian threat very well. I think he's done a good job of suppressing ISIL. But when it comes to Russia, I think he's making a mistake here. And at the end of the day, we're a separate branch of government, and we're going to push back, and hopefully the president will respond and implement the law that we passed. If he doesn't, then we're going to have a problem.
Yeah, it is the law of the land.
It's
it was
the law of the
passed
land,
in the House of the Senate,
yes, it is.
Signed into law by the president reluctantly, but he did sign it.
Right.
It still is not being implemented. On a different subject, Senator, I want to ask you about CNN's excellent reporting on a huge problem, Libyan slave auctions of fellow human beings going on in Libya right now. You saw Nima El-Bagher, her excellent report. After the president tweeted, though, that CNN International is, and I'm quoting him, a major source of fake news, Libyan media, they're now using that presidential tweet to question the truth of the CNN report. Are you concerned, Senator, and you're a blunt guy, that the president's Twitter attacks on the news media are emboldening other countries to label real serious reporting as fake, or could even lead to American journalists working overseas being jailed or attacked?
Well, I think the president feels like that CNN and about every other major news outlet in this country is just unfair to the point of being over the top unfair. I think there's some truth to that, but you're a good news organization. The report in Libya was well done. It was a natural result of us leaving, abandoning in Libya after Gaddafi fell. It's a terrible situation. Hope the president understands that what you reported in Libya is real. But you've got to understand, too, that if you're President Trump, you can't turn on CNN or any other news network in the country without somebody beating the hell out of him. And I guess that wears on him.
But that's the nature of a free press. That's our responsibility to report the news honestly and fairly, and not just do whatever a president or any world leader wants.
I'm not suggesting that you report the news in a way that you think is unfair. But let's be honest with you. Honest about this. MSNBC and CNN is just 24 hours a day that Trump did something wrong and stupid. And also good news reporting on Fox. He's always right. So the bottom line is you've got to understand why most Republicans don't trust CNN.
Yeah, well, I just want to point out what he was attacking. He attacked CNN all the time, but he was specifically attacking over the weekend CNN International.
Right. Well, I'm not attacking you. I'm on your show.
Our reporters around where they risk their lives every day to report the news fairly and responsibly. And when the President of the United States starts calling this fake news, that endangers those reporters, and it emboldens autocrats and dictators to simply, shut the opportunities down for a free press. That's the concern I have, and I'm sure you share that concern.
Yeah, well, listen, I saw this coming a long time ago. Clinton and Obama basically just withdrew after Gaddafi fell. There was a moment when Senator McCain and myself, Rubio and Senator Kirk went to Libya with a little bit of help, a little NATO assistance. The vacuum would not have been filled by a bunch of radical jihadists. The Libyan people are good people. They rejected radical Islamic groups at the ballot box, but the security environment completely deteriorated because the West abandoned Libya after Gaddafi fell. So at the end of the day, the story you told in Libya about human slavery is true, and is terrible, and it was foreseeable, and we need to fix it. And there you go.
Yeah, and if CNN, Nima El-Bagher and her team hadn't reported that, we wouldn't know that.
There you go.
In this day and age, there's a slave trade going on in Libya right now. All right, Senator, there's more we need to discuss. There are other developments unfolding as we speak. We'll take a quick break, resume our conversation right after this.
Absolutely.
So, Senator, how big of a role did President Trump play in getting this tax bill through your committee? You're a member of the Senate Budget Committee. It passed 12 Republicans versus 11 Democrats.
Let me tell you, I thought he did a masterful job today in lunch. He met with Susan Collins, myself, and Senator Alexander before lunch because Senator Collins has got a concern that if you repeal the individual mandate, premiums are going to go up. She's really worried about stopping the subsidy payments, the CSR payments, and she comes from the Northeast and she wants a $10,000 property tax deduction like the House has. The President and Senator Collins had a very good meeting. She wants some other things also, but the President said to her and to the conference as a whole that if we repeal the individual mandate as part of a tax cut, I will fund the CSRs, I will put some money into a high-risk pool, the Collins-Nelson bill, and that he would support a $10,000 property tax deduction. So that was a huge step forward in terms of meeting Senator Collins' legitimate needs. Senator Corker, I think, is very close to finding a trigger that will work in terms of his deficit concerns. I talked to Ron Johnson just before I came on your program. I think we'll find a way to give better treatment to pass-through entities. The bottom line is 52 people are trying to buy a car. Here's our choices. We may not all agree on the color or the type car, but if we don't get a car, we're all going to walk. And most people don't want to walk. They'd rather have a car. Well,
when it comes to the President's commitment to Susan Collins, the Republican from Maine, is there a chance, Senator, the President doesn't actually deliver on that commitment? Because, as you know, previously he expressed support for the Alexander Murray legislation in the Senate. Senator Murray, Senator Alexander, as soon as he expressed support for that legislation dealing with health care, bipartisan legislation, his White House Director of Legislative Affairs, Mark Short, he was here in the Situation Room. He said that wasn't necessarily the case. A lot of people are concerned. He makes a promise, but then he backs away.
Well, here's what I believe. He said it to the entire Republican conference. He said it to Susan Collins, and I believe him. And here's the way it would work. Is that if you do repeal the individual mandate, which I think we should as part of the tax bill, then you need to really make the subsidy payments because that would create premium increases if you stop the payments, and put that Alexander Murray, Collins, Nelson proposal on any effort to fund the government, whether it be an omnibus bill or a continuing resolution. I believe the President will keep his word, and I think that is a good deal for the country at large.
We still don't know if your other Republican colleagues, Senators Corker and Flake, are a yes on the bill when the final vote comes up on the Senate floor. Wouldn't amendments winning them over, though, potentially lose other Republican votes? As the Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says, this is a Rubik's Cube.
Well, it's not. People have legitimate concerns. What if the economy doesn't grow the way we think it will and the revenue doesn't come in? The trigger is to deal with that situation. Senator Corker says, if we don't grow the way you think we will, then I want to have a backstop. So I think he's reached an accommodation with the Finance Committee that I'll let him speak for himself, that to me is a really good deal. If we don't hit that 0.4% of GDP growth to pay for this tax cut, there'll be a trigger that will roll back some of the tax cuts. I think that's going to happen. I think they're very close to a deal. I know Ron Johnson very well. He's smart as hell. His concerns are legitimate, and I think we can address them.
So would you support that, what's that called, that snapback?
Yeah.
In other words, if the economy isn't booming at 3 or 4%, but let's say it's under 2%, you would go back and increase taxes?
Well, what I would do is have a trigger saying if we don't, 0.4% of GDP growth. Number one, I don't like the Obama-era tax policies. I don't replace them. During the 8 years of President Obama, the average GDP growth was 1.9%. We've had a 1/4 of 3%. We can do a lot better than 1.9%. 0.4% pays for the 1.5 trillion. The bottom line is, for some reason we don't hit that number, then I'm willing to roll back some of the taxes, because the deficit matters to me. It matters to Senator Corker.
Would you roll back individual tax rates or corporate tax rates?
I'll let Senator Corker tell you how it works, because he's the guy behind this. And I think a lot of people in our conference agree with the idea that we need a debt backstop. I think a lot of people in our conference, if we repeal the individual mandate, would like to see the subsidy payments made to make sure that the insurance market stays stable until we can actually replace Obamacare. I think most people in our conference believe we can do better than President Obama when it comes to the economy. This tax cut is good. We'll have a debt backstop. In repealing the individual mandate is good policy. Continuing the subsidies till we replace Obamacare with something better makes sense.
So I just want to be precise, Senator. The corporate rates you don't think would go back up. Right now they want to reduce the corporate rate from 30%, 35% to 20%, and that's permanent. There's no sunset. There's no time limit. Individual families, they would have a reduction in tax rates, but that would be sunsetted after 10 years or so. Why not sunset the corporate rates as opposed to the individual family rates?
Well, the point that Senator Corker is making, if we don't grow by 0.4%, which I'm confident we will, we need a mechanism in year 6, I think it is, to readjust the tax cut. And I'll let him tell you what makes sense to him. The one concern you have about a trigger or a backstop is that people invest hundreds of billions of dollars, and they got to be fairly certain.
But I just want to be precise. You would, after 6 years, let's say the economy isn't booming as you hope it will, and there's going to be a huge rise in the nation's debt. You would go ahead and increase tax rates for individuals, for families, but leave the corporate rate at, let's say, 20%.
What I'm trying to tell you is I'll let Senator Corker tell you about how the trigger would work. What I'm trying to tell you is, after having talked with him today, I think he's reached an accommodation with the Finance Committee, Senator Toomey from Pennsylvania, that makes him feel good about the trigger. I think at the end of the day, we'll find a pass-through reform measure that will make Senator Johnson feel that pass-throughs are being treated more fairly. One thing I agree with Senator Johnson on, I don't like the idea that C corporations can deduct their state and local taxes and pass-through entities and individuals can't. So I would support a change to the Senate bill that would take away from C corporations the ability to deduct state and local taxes and put them in the same boat as everybody else.
One final question. Your good friend, Senator McCain, what do you think? Because he's leaving the door open either way.
Here's what I think. John will look at this long and hard. His number one goal is to restore defense spending. To my Democratic colleagues, I can't imagine turning down a request from President Obama to meet with him, even though we disagreed. To Pelosi and Schumer, you know, you've got a job to do. You represent the party out of power. But there's a deal to be had to fund the government. And the last thing we need to do is shut down the government with North Korea threatening our homeland. The last thing we need to do is continue defense spending at the level we have today. Senator McCain's primary reason for being in the Senate right now is to fix a broken military. He will vote on the tax bill if he thinks it's good for Arizona and good for America. I hope he can get to yes. I think the economy needs to grow better than it has in the last 8 years. But I'm telling everybody, this North Korea threat is real, and the last thing we need to do is